blue skies and sunny where you are as well, although we look to get drenched over the weekend. Just heard that on the radio. I'm not much of a weather guy. I'm not the guy that watches the weather. Number one, when I was a sportscaster and I got my 3 to 5 minutes every night at 6 and at 10, and then I would see the weather guy before me run through radar and maps. And I thought, and always thought this from the time that I started watching the news when I was a little lad, I thought, don't we just want to know how nice it's going to be outside? Isn't that really what it comes down to? Is I'd like to know if it's going to rain, if it's going to be sunny, what is the temperature going to be? I don't need to see a bunch of radar and maps. That would be like the sportscaster, and this was my defense, and this was my argument at the time. This would be like me coming on giving diagrams of plays instead of just reporting the sports news and giving my take on the sports news. But I didn't necessarily, my complaints and my concerns and my perspective didn't change the industry, that's for sure. But here we are on a Friday night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. And again, hope your weekend is off to a great start. All right. As it stands for me, now that I've left the day job, or what was the night job / day job, the weekends are whatever I want the weekends to be, which is nice to a certain extent. All right, welcome in. And of course, we will get to the big news concerning the College Football Playoff Selection Committee and what they are considering. Also, the news of the day includes something that we talked about a little bit last night. And if you have any further thoughts on the overtime playoff, the overtime rule, not the overtime playoff rule, the overtime rule in college football being changed, and Neil Brown, West Virginia, and Paul Christ, Wisconsin, receiving contract extensions, maybe jumping the gun a bit there at West Virginia following their 6-4 season and Army Bowl victory. All right, everyone, before I pull the ticker at the bottom and replace it with the phone number, 860-499-3332. And in taking your calls, I want to remind everyone to shop Amazon. I don't think I got to remind anybody to shop Amazon. That place is doing like $70 million of business every minute. So they're pretty much taking over the world. So we don't need to remind anybody to shop on Amazon, because that's what you just do. But in terms of using the link in the description section of any of the videos, go to any of the videos, grab the link next to where it says Amazon in big, bold caps. Grab that link, put it somewhere where you'll remember it when you do your shopping, and use that link. It's the same shopping experience, and you don't spend any additional money. You just help us build the channel to ensure that we'll be here come football season. 2021 and 22 and 23 and beyond. All right, let's get the phone lines open, and I do believe that we've got a call coming in, so we'll get right to it. So keep in mind, I have yet to look into any of this College Football Playoff Committee business. We're going to do that here soon. As soon as we take this call, and then I will certainly chime in with my thoughts after I read the article with all of you. Got David Greenshield on the line. David, how are we doing tonight? Hello, Dave. Let me try this again. Hello, Dave. Yes, I can. How you doing tonight? Yes. I'm a fan of overtime rather than tying games. Am I a fan of the format? What I like about the format is that it's fair. The NFL is not fair. That's what I don't like about the NFL. It's not fair. And even though they changed it to make it more fair, it's still not fair. You can get the ball, keep the ball, score a touchdown, and end the game, which makes it, again, more fair than what it used to be with sudden death and kickers making 55-yard field goals. But at least it's fair. The opportunity is equal on both sides. So I like that. I don't like that. I don't like contrived situations. So, for example, in Major League Baseball, as you will know, during this pandemic year of 2020, and I was told last night that they actually continued it into this season, that in extra innings, they're putting runners on base. Well, yeah, that's what I had stated, that it was in play for last year, and then I was told last night that it was continuing. It's a contrived situation because my first response is, okay, how did that runner get on second base? Nothing happened to earn the runner being placed on second base. Just like, how did the ball get placed on the 25-yard line? Just because we placed it on the 25. I don't like contrived situations. Yep. I would need to clarify whether that's after the second overtime or in the second overtime. Let me clarify that. Okay, yeah, NCAA 2-point conversion now required in second overtime. So they're only playing one overtime session, which, again, isn't really a full possession for either squad going in from the 25-yard line. And then on that second possession, they have to go for two. And then I believe after somewhere in the 5 overtime range, then they just start running 2-point plays.
A long time ago, and it just didn't seem to be like something ridiculous, like 50 to 60% of the time a team won the coin flip, they won the game and scored on their first possession. I don't know if you ever looked into that, Mark.
I've seen various statistics like that. I don't recall what it was, but I just always thought it was completely unfair for a team to receive the football and have the opportunity to end the game just because they won a coin flip. And again, they've made it better, but it's still not better. We saw Super Bowl one a couple of years ago, and Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons never touched the football in overtime.
Yeah,
they lost a coin flip.
Right, but Mark, some would say Matt Ryan and the Falcons lost that game before it went to the overtime.
Well, that has nothing to do with what happens in over. To be fair, that has nothing to do with it. If they would have blown a 49-0 lead, that I understand how people think that they think, oh, well, they shouldn't have never been in that position. Well, that has nothing to do with the way the game should be formatted to be fair in overtime. You know, we arrive at overtime in all sorts of different ways. Regardless of how they managed or mismanaged the game, they were in overtime to win a Super Bowl, and they never touched the football because they lost a coin flip.
The only thing that I was going to say, I mean, and I was trying to make the point that, again, that I don't think it's as high. I mean, you're saying, you seem to be stating, well, if you win the coin flip, you're going to automatically win the game in the overtime.
I don't care if you never. I don't care if the team that wins the coin flip never scores the first time to win the game. It's still a completely unfair advantage.
Okay.
The team that possesses how often does a defense score versus an offense? The offense scores 99% of the points scored in NFL games. It's overwhelming. So who has the advantage? The team that gets the ball or the team that doesn't get the ball to score?
Right. Well, the thing that I was going to mention was, you know, if you win the coin flip, also what I was going to say, well, first of all, number one, you pay the defensive players a lot of money too to get stops. So, you know, they have to be accountable for their side of the ball, number one.
Oh, sure.
And, you know, number two, I think that, you know, it also depends on and sometimes I guess maybe it's becoming more prevalent now that football's become higher scoring and the offenses are on steroids nowadays, that there's a much higher chance than you can win the game by winning the coin flip maybe nowadays than it was, let's say, in the 80s or the 90s when we were maybe playing a little bit more 17-14 kind of football games. And, you know, you could trust your defense maybe a little bit more in the overtime than you can maybe now today. I guess my bottom line question to the Mark would be, how would you remedy it? Would you just play out the 15 minutes in overtime, kind of like you do with basketball?
I have thought that through, and I did come up with a system at one point, and it's escaping me. That's been so long ago. Yeah, I'd have to sit down and really think it through. But off the top of my head, yeah, you either play a shortened quarter, and regardless of who scores when, you could score 50 times or never. The game's over after 10 minutes. Or you could, you can set it up in a similar way as the college game, except, include special teams. So what I don't like about the college format is I think where they get it right is the most important aspect of it for me is to give equal opportunity to both teams. It's completely fair in college, regardless of how contrived it is. Right. It's at least fair. But there's this odd thing about the way it's set up that special teams is nearly eliminated. But at the same time, the field goal kicker is accentuated, especially before the scoring proliferation. So if we take it back 23 years to 1997, when overtime started in college football, your field goal kicker was extremely important because if you place that ball at the 25-yard line, you've got a 42-yard kick. And for the average college football team, that's not necessarily, especially 25 years ago, a sure thing. So your field goal kicker becomes paramount, becomes disproportionately important, and special teams becomes disproportionately unimportant other than your field goal kicker.
Right. I guess the one kind of where you're going with it is just kick the ball off, no matter what happens. So each team gets a possession. No, each team gets a possession. So I kick the ball off to you, and no matter what happens on your possession, I get it. Let's say you go down and score a touchdown. You have to go. You have to kick the ball off to me, and I have to at least get a chance to drive the field and score a touchdown to match you. So then you have both teams, getting involved, but at least both teams would have to go, maybe 75, 80 yards on touchdown drives.
We had this conversation last night with Cam Underwood, and I think you have to look at it. Well, you can look at it a number of ways, but I'll break it down in two separate categories. One being, what is the best way to do it that it maintains the integrity of the sport and is fair? That's one category. Let's maintain the integrity of the sport and make it fair, equal opportunity. But then the second category is that we're not playing the game on paper. We're playing with individuals. And obviously these guidelines, these rules are being put in place to protect from injury. So unfortunately, we can't play the game on paper because then we just worry about the first category. But we've got to address the second category, which are the players and their health. So what I would want to have answered, David, would be, we've got 130 teams playing FBS football. They play 12 games. We've got roughly 800 games being played in the regular season in college football. I would love to know how many of those games are at, let's say, 3 overtimes and more. How many of those games are being extended really that far?
Right. Well, just in general, I wonder, how many overtimes we play, over the course of a year. I mean, I know I haven't seen the complete breakdown on that. How many, I don't know if you can pull that up, how many overtime games we had in 2020 or even 2019. But, I don't know, Mark. I guess the only other way they could go is kind of what I mentioned, is if you want to still give both teams an opportunity, then at least both teams should have an opportunity. Because I get what you're saying. You're basically gifting a team right now, free points by giving them the ball inside the 25-yard line, or giving the ball at the 25-yard line. Because at that point, even if you don't get a yard, you've got to make a 42-yard field goal to get points. And field goal kicking, it has become better since 1997, since we instituted the overtime. Although it's not great, there's still a lot of college kickers, I believe, that can make 42-yard field goals. And that's to say that you didn't even gain a yard. So I think the one thing that they could do is just kick the ball off and let both teams have a possession. And I think that could be the fairest way, other than maybe, let's just say, playing out the 15 minutes. And, okay, let's just play out a quarter's worth of football and see where we're at, at the end of the period.
Yeah. So I approached the conversation last night thinking, there's a lot of things I would like to do with sports and with college football in particular without taking the human element into it, like a 16-team playoff, like overtime. Let them play in forever until somebody wins the game, all those things. But then you have to consider, again, the human beings that have to put themselves through that. And that's when I came up with a thought of, I would like to know, how many times would we really be taxing these players extensively? And that's to anyone and anyone's determination. To me, that's a third overtime, something in that range. Again, there's not a perfect answer, but to where it seems, again, that they're being taxed to a large degree beyond what they typically are. And that's why I don't think the full quarter would ever fly.
Yeah, I mean that was my only other thought process, to make it as fair as possible. The only other alternative, like I said, would be each team gets the ball, but you kick the ball off and make them drive the field. Barring unless of course they return the kickoff for a touchdown. So, I mean, those would be my only other ways to fix it that I can think of off the top of my head. that would replace the current structure we've got right now, which I'm not crazy about either. So,
all right.
Well,
if I get a chance,
did we solve anything today, Mark?
I don't think we did, David. Unfortunately, we typically solve it at least between the two of us, but this time I'm still out there in regards to what would be the best plan. Yeah, I don't like it, but yeah, I may think it over and post something.
Well, all right, my friend. As always, a good discussion, and you take care of yourself.
Thanks for the call, David. Appreciate it.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right, we got our guy Kevin from Dallas, Georgia, calling in. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
Good evening, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
Doing great. Oh, it's that time again, Mark. It's that time again. Hey, I have to give my all times as far as USC as well as FSU, Florida State. So as far as USC, for those that are uninitiated, that is University of Southern California, not the University of South Carolina. Okay, here goes. Initially, Mark, I was having issues as far as at the QB, but upon further review, I went with Carson Palmer. As far as running back is concerned, a little old, a little new. As far as on the old side, Orenthal, James Simpson. And then as far as the new would be Reggie Bush. As far as wide receivers concerned, Lynn Swan and Keyshawn Johnson. As far as O-line is concerned, the first two were easy. Then the next four or so were, I'll leave it to you as far as the four after the easy two. Tony Baselli, Anthony Munoz, Keith Van Horn, Bruce Matthews, Don Mosbar, Ron Yeri, and Tyrone Smith.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I didn't think you were going to get a couple
D-line,
of those.
I'm not going to lie to you, Mark. I came up with the blank as far as the D-line. Now, linebackers, I don't know whether I'm going to have to run a dog on 0-4 front, 0-4-6 front or something. But as far as D-line, I came up with, I couldn't come up with anyone on the D-line. But as far as linebackers and defensive backs, a plethora. Linebackers, Junior Seau, Clay Matthews. I'm going to butcher the young man's last name, but he was on that same class with Matthews and Cushing. Ray is the first name. I cannot pronounce the last name. Started with an M. He's played with the Bengals.
Played with the Bengals?
Yes, linebacker R-E-Y. He was on that same the championship game class versus Vince Young's Texas team. He was one of the three linebackers. R-E-Y. Ray was the first name. Last name again with the letter M. It's like M-A-L-U-A-U-G-A, something like that.
Oh.
But let's push on to the...
Yeah. Okay,
then as far as the secondary, Ronnie Lott, Dennis Smith, Mark Carey, and Troy P., or as we call him, the head and shoulders man. D-line, I just drew a blank, Mark.
Yeah, that's a good lineup.
Unless you want to put Chip Banks up there.
Yeah, I thought of Chip Banks, Cleveland Brown. That's did you put Clay Matthews' brother on the offensive line?
Yes, or it's Bruce.
Yes.
Oh, was that the father? Okay.
No, that's his brother.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's okay. Duly noted, Mark. Duly noted. I'm gonna push on to Florida State. As far as Florida State, initially it was difficult, but then I guess I got caught up in the moment. Charlie Ward as far as quarterback. As far as the O-line, I could only come up with two, and that was Jamie Dukes and Walter Jones. Or do you want me to put Clay Shiver in there also?
Cam Irving comes to mind.
Running. Okay, was that the guy that wound up playing with the Browns?
I believe he was with the Browns. He played with Jameis Winston.
Okay. Running back, I had a difficulty. I only had one running back. I had a little bit of difficulty because there's so many running backs, and the one that just readily came to mind was Ward Dunn. Or should I come up with Amp Lee?
Amp Lee, nice, number 32. Sammy Smith. More recently, we've got Dalvin Cook, James Wilder, Devontae Freeman. Those guys come to mind.
Okay. Wideouts, I have three. The man whose name is named after the war, Valentikov, as far as Peter Warwick and Anquan Bolden. Tight end, Pat Carter. Now, suppose on the defensive side, Mark, is something that is revolutionary or evolutionary, depending on how you want to look at it. I'm looking at a 5-2-4 front, or 5-2-4 front. As far as my D line is as follows: Ron Simmons, Pete Bolwell, Reinhard Wilson, Derek Alexander, and Andre Wadsworth. At the linebacker position, Derek Brooks, Marvin Jones, Sam Coward. My DBs will be Buckley, Butler, and Sanders. Then my punter, Ron Stark, and my place kicker, of course, would be Janikowski.
So no Jalen Ramsey or LaMarcus Joyner in the secondary. You got T-Buck there. I got to tell you, every time you opened a position group, I thought of a couple of guys that I thought that you weren't going to mention, and you did, like an Andre Wadsworth.
And the way I have to do it, more plain and simple, is I can't, I can't do it in the respect of guys that were before your as well as my lifetime. I mean, it's in those rare times, like that's when I did the Alabama, I could see some black and whites as far as some of the Alabama guys and get some kind of feel because of just by osmosis over the years. But then when it came in other respects, I just couldn't do it, Mark. As far as, and when it came to the DBs, as far as Florida State, it was pretty much those three pretty much stood head and shoulders above as far as LaMarcus Joyner.
So did I catch this correctly, that you mentioned that Warwick and who was it that won the Biletnikoff Award? Who did you say? Peter Warwick?
Fred Biletnikoff. No, I was just speaking in reference to. I was just trying to tongue in cheek in regards to. I mean, how in the world can you have a Biletnikoff Award and you not put Fred Biletnikoff as far as your wide receiver?
Okay.
For Florida State.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I would, if I really sat here and thought about it, would have a lot of contributions across the board, but can't think of any egregious misses or anything. I think you could take the USC wide receiver position all over the place with Dwayne Jarrett and Steve Smith and Deontay Burnett, if you're just looking at college production.
Exactly. And I mean, it was just, and the thing is, and the one thing you'll find in doing it, Mark, is that when it comes to some Power 5 schools, it is difficult. And then when it comes to some of them, it's just a matter of it being just top heavy, for lack of a better way to say it, as far as at some position. And the one thing that, as far as the next time we speak, Mark, is that, hey, I'm going to bring controversy to your show when I do the all-time Tennessee team.
Okay.
And if you remember when our previous conversation, you know what position I'm going to go there with, and we're going to probably go back and forth. You're going to have to pull out your saber, and I'm going to pull out my saber in reference to when we go back and forth as far as the all-time Tennessee team.
Did you mention Joey Browner, at defensive back at USC?
No, I didn't. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
Man, he was a good one.
And that was the thing as far as when it came to USC, as far as linebacker and DB, it was just doggone 3 and 4 deep. But then when it came to the other positions, I'm not going to lie to you, Mark, it was like pulling teeth.
Pulling teeth at USC. I can't confirm this because I haven't run the numbers and made the lists of just the player after player after player after player. But if somebody just pulled a gun to my head, I believe that I would say that USC's produced the best NFL players of any school in the country.
I couldn't argue with you about that. The one thing I would just, as far as when it comes to many other institutions, my question mark in regards to that would be, do you feel that when it comes to USC in comparison to some other schools, could it just be a matter of, and I hate to use the word luck, or I'll use the word providence when it comes to health, because when it comes to many of the other institutions, and I don't have to go there as far as that scripted red or scripted white A again, is that when it comes to those guys, when they come into the NFL, they have extensive medical reports when they leave the University of Alabama, compared to, I would probably say, any other institution. Because although in this fine print it will say, okay, you're going to win multiple national championships. Yes, you will play in the NFL one day. But then also in that very, very, very fine print, it states that, hey, you're going to have extensive, as far as medical profile as far as once you go to the league. Because that has been, because when you look at it, when it comes to, say, for instance, the running back position, the only guy that has entered the league pretty much with a clear medical report would be Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram. But when it comes to all the other backs, they were pretty much shot before they got there. Case in point, Trent Richardson.
Why do you think that is? If that is true, I can't confirm that Alabama players are more banged up and injured than other players.
Well, I would say one thing is this, Mark, and that is when it comes to particular positions, and then you have to look at it as far as when it comes to relationships. One relationship as far as Belichick and Saban. They are, for lack of a better term, boys.
Mm-hmm.
Belichick, if anything, is very reluctant as far as when it comes to injury reports. When it comes to Saban, the only thing that Saban is going to say when it comes to his players is that, hey, they're unavailable. I mean, that was pretty much and the thing is, I'm not trying to throw Coach Saban under the bus, but as far as that has been his case, he would just say that so-and-so is unavailable, and that is it. So, and it's like, what's the old saying? As far as the difference between being hurt and being injured, if you're in one boat, you can play. If you're in the other boat, you can't play. And I would say when it comes to University of Alabama, it just depends on the position in which I find it to be an attrition when it comes to health. And I don't know whether to say, and definitely as far as O-line, running backs, I would say prior to Henry. But the other positions, okay, you get your normal bumps and bruises, but the one positions that stand out, I would say, is more so O-line, running back, as well as if I had to also throw in linebacker.
I've been racking my brain because I can't believe that I can't think of USC defensive linemen. So it's taken me all this time to come up with, I've come up with 5 or 6, but I came up with 3 that I feel comfortable serving up as all-time, at least for that school, all-time greats. One I feel very comfortable in is Willie McGinnis.
Oh, definitely. I don't know how he slipped off my radar. But
Sean Cody was a really good player at USC, and Darrell Russell was a dominant defensive lineman at USC. But that's all I'm coming up
Cody,
with.
that would be C-O-A-D-Y, Mark. As far as that last name?
C-O-D-Y, Sean Cody.
I was just trying to bring it to my memory. Okay, yes, I remember.
But I would, my goodness, I can't believe at USC that there aren't some other guys that would come to mind, like just edge rushers.
But wouldn't the Browner kid be more so along those lines?
Joey Browner? No, he was a safety.
Not Browner. No. I was just trying. But for the most part, most of the guys, though, Mark, when you think about it, as far as that were D linemen, were your outside linebackers, or as far as your rush in.
Yeah.
There weren't guys as far as they put their hand down as far as clogging up the middle. So.
Yeah, I can't think of those kind of guys. I'm sure they exist, but I'm not thinking of any great D tackles that plugged up, running lanes. I'm not thinking of those kind of guys. Very recently, Adoree Jackson was a really good cornerback. He's not in the Ronnie Lott, Dwight Hicks category, but he's a top 15 or 20 pick in the NFL draft. And Tim McDonald was a great player with the Arizona Cardinals that played at USC at safety. I would put him in that category of great all-time USC players.
Now, he would be your strong safety?
Well, I don't know how they played it at the time. I don't know.
I mean, it's and that's really the thing. I mean, I just went back and forth, Mark, and I'm just glad that I wasn't alone when it comes to D-lineman for doggone Southern Cal, because I racked my brain, I racked my brain, and I wasn't going to use no doggone cheat sheet in order to do it. Everything is, pretty much over, trying to do it over doggone 30 years of living.
Well,
and as far as having an opportunity,
yeah, that's what I hate is when somebody serves up a question to me, I want to be able to, I don't want to run and look it up. I want to test myself and see if I can come up with the answer before. And then in a situation like this, where you're talking about dozens and dozens of players, then I usually kick myself because I know everybody that I'm going to look up. I just didn't think of them. The two guys that I did think of it, the more we talk about this, is these guys played in the mid 80s and at linebacker for a couple of good USC teams, one that beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but they played together, and they were both, I believe, first round picks in the NFL, and one of them was a pretty decent head coach in the NFL and certainly defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, and Dwayne Bickett was a first round pick, and he was a very highly decorated college player, All-American at linebacker for USC.
Exactly. I don't once again, have to kick myself in regards to Del Rio. I mean, I remember that like not yesterday, but the day before yesterday. So I understand.
Absolutely. No, it's tough to do. It's a tough assignment. All right, Kevin. Anything else?
Well, again, thanks for indulging, Mark. Hey, you take care. Oh, well, I appreciate as far as, when it comes to as far as dealing with this playoff issue, I'm glad that you and the previous caller were able to handle that, because, hey, that's well above my pay grade. I mean, in the words of Herman Edwards, that's why they play the game. So, hey, I'll let them, but the one thing that has always been put up, and after this, I'll be quiet, Mark, when it comes to that issue, is that everything I've heard as far as the negative has been more so in regards to injury. So, I mean, I don't know how you're going to be able to avoid that, but I think, as always, just as you put out there as far as the playoff, thoughts as far as a 16-team playoff, as well as when it comes to an overtime rule, when it's all said and done, Mark, I think it's going to come down to your Alabamas, your Clemsons, your Ohio State, et cetera, that are doggone 3 and 4 deep. And it's going to wind up being a battle of attrition, because I don't think that if you only have just 22 players, that 22 players can continually have these 30 to 40 mile per hour collisions play after play after play. And my 44 is going to supersede your 22. Or my 55 going to supersede your 22, or 66, etc.
All right, Kevin. Well, thank you so much for the call.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark. Hey, you take care and continue doing what you're doing. And, hey, I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Appreciate that. My apologies on David's call. I don't necessarily know what happened there. It might have happened when got everything plugged in here. I don't know. I won't try to dissect it right now. David, thank you so much for the super chat. We will get to your comment in just a second, because I want to make sure that everybody's hearing our current calls. Seems like we are. I don't want to go too far down in the chat, because I've got an issue. If I go too far down in the chat, then I can't go back and retrieve other comments. All right. So here's the deal. David, thank you so much for the super chat. I so much appreciate your contributions, and David has been a tremendous support in a number of ways for the last couple of years. And basically is pointing out here that you can give through the super chat, which I very much appreciate. but the Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App options come directly to myself and whomever so understand with a number of our shows that I distribute those contributions with our guests. And so YouTube is the filter there that is avoided. So the large portion that YouTube takes out of those contributions are avoided if you hit me up directly at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App and just search Mark Rogers TV. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, you bypass the YouTube filtering out their share, which is quite sizable. And so that's what David would like me to explain. David, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm not going to go on about the business, but yeah, we're running a business here, and we want to be here talking college football, and that's why I avoid these topics of business most of the time, but from time to time it's brought up. So understand, for example, and I saw a study done on this, that if you flip on SportsCenter on ESPN, if you did that 30 years ago, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but I'll hit it very close, that if you would have flipped on SportsCenter, as most of us did 30 years ago, 25 years ago, you were going to see promotion like 3% of the time that it takes to put on that hour show. That hour show is typically about 12 to 14 minutes of ads, commercials, and then the rest is content. Well, out of that content, 90-some percent, 95 to 98% of it was sports news, highlights, everything that you tuned in to see. Do you know that 3% has gone to like 25 or 30% of these sports shows that you watch on television? Meaning that like 25% of the time, they're basically telling you, this is what we've got coming up later in the show. This is what we've got coming up Friday night. Oh, we're going to show the Mets-Phillies game next Wednesday night. You know, they're basically promoting. They're spending about a quarter of the time or more promoting themselves. So that would be like me coming on here for a 2-hour call-in show, and for what, about 40 minutes just telling you, watch my live streams, here are the videos I produced this week, watch those, contribute to Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, talking about Amazon. If I did that for like 40 minutes out of a 2-hour call-in show, that would be similar to what's done on the networks. So from time to time, somebody complains about me mentioning that the Amazon link's available or something like that I spend all of about 9 seconds explaining. And every so often every couple of weeks, I would say, somebody complains about me promoting those things too much. Well, if those things don't get promoted and responded to, then I'm not going to be here at some point. So, David, thank you so much for that reminder, though. That's awesome. All right. Numbers down at the bottom of the screen at 860-499-3332. In the meantime, I'm going to look at this article. So when I named the show sometime this afternoon, I was recording Ole Miss, and we did an Oklahoma live stream this afternoon. So check those out. And I recorded something else this afternoon. So I didn't have a chance to look at the College Football Playoff Committee's meeting today and what's been reported from it. That's what I wanted to get into, because I just figured that would be the most interesting. Because the one thing I will say about our live chats here is that you're going to get the largest cross section of college football fans. That's been my experience. So when we've got these big issues, national issues, then we're going to hit on them because they affect everybody. All right. So this is coming from the desk of Heather Dinich, ESPN. Hang on. Got to cut the audio here, or that will be another YouTube violation. Okay. While continuing to reiterate its support for the current 4-team format, the College Football Playoff Management Committee this week was presented with possibilities for future expansion, including options ranging from 6 to 16 teams. Okay. If they go to 6 teams, oh my word. If they go to 6 teams, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know. We should probably just put the camera at the corner of my living room and I'll just take a sledgehammer and go through windows and walls and TV monitors or something. If they go to 6 teams without realizing the complete idiocy of that. If I was in that room as a member of the playoff committee and somebody came in with a 6-team proposal. Okay. A working group within the College Football Playoff Management Committee. So we've got the College Football Playoff Committee. Then we have the Management Committee. They need to be managed. I'd have to have that explained to me, which comprises the 10 FBS commissioners plus Notre Dame Athletic Director Jack Swarbrick. Discussed some 63 possibilities for change. Okay. I'm not going to criticize that. According to a news release from the College Football Playoff Committee, those included models of 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 teams, each with a variety of different scenarios. I missed my invite. I've got a proposal. College Football Playoff Executive Director Bill Hancock told ESPN that nothing is imminent. Where did these proposals come from? Is this being... The committee was presented with possibilities for future expansion. By whom? Who? Who are these people that proposed? Who are they? That seems to be and I'll hold off here because I haven't read the entire article, but if that doesn't get clarified, then this is what I learned when I started writing classes was who, what, where, why, how. Okay, there will not be a new format this season or next season, Hancock said. Okay, I'll keep that locked in here because I'm going to be asked that about 48 times in the next month. The timetable is certainly an important detail, but it hasn't been determined yet. It's too soon to predict the timing, but even if the board decides to alter the format, it may well not occur until after the current agreement expires after the 2025 season. Okay. 2025. So we still have to play 21, 5 more seasons. The College Football Playoff has set up a working group. Wait a minute. He said not the next 2 seasons. It may well not. So there's a possibility something gets done after next season, the 22 season, but most likely it's after the 25 season. Okay. The playoff has set up a working group of 4 management committee members. Not going to go through them. They are expected to make a report to the entire management committee about the future format at the College Football Playoffs next meeting, which could be this summer. If there is a model the entire group supports, the committee will present it to the College Football Playoff Board of Managers, who have the ultimate authority over the playoff format. That's who I'm supposed to be blaming in all this, huh? The College Football Playoff Board of Managers. Those are those 10 FBS commissioners plus Swarbrick. They're the ones to blame. Okay, for the playoff to change, those 11 presidents and chancellors would have to approve it. Okay, the college football playoff is entering its 8th season, blah, blah, blah. Has to be unanimously agreed upon. More and more people, not just fans, but the 10 commissioners and Notre Dame who have a vote in the matter are saying it's time to look at expansion. I would love to have a log on how many times it's been mentioned by any of these committee people, whether they're managers or the board or whomever, about how the 4-team playoff is the ultimate. Does that mean 2 years from now? Does it mean after the current 12-year contract expansion? Okay, blah, blah, blah. We already went through that. This is amusing when you read some of these comments, because you can place some of these comments that were made today against similar, against the same people making dissimilar comments that completely contradict. Now suddenly there's so much dissatisfaction over the current system. That's not what they've been telling us. They've been telling us the system's great and everybody loves the system and it works. And now suddenly there's all this dissatisfaction, which I agree with, but it took them 8 years to figure that out. It took them 8 years to figure out the system sucks. They've been saying it's great for 7 years. Oh, my word. Now suddenly people are dissatisfied with it. We've always been dissatisfied. The system sucks. Oh, my word. The Pac-12 champion's been left out 5 times in 7 seasons. Oregon and Washington, the only teams to represent the conference, with a 1-2 record. Before the Pac-12 season began in November, Commissioner Larry Scott suggested expanding the field to 8 teams this season. Hancock also said the 2021 playoff in Indianapolis will resume more of a normal look after a season in the midst of the pandemic. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, they're going to hopefully arrive at a better playoff format after they've been telling us for 8 years that this playoff format's great. It works. How many times has that been stated by the playoff committee that this system works? And now suddenly it doesn't work. $63 proposals. That doesn't bother me. The 63 proposals, I would just love to know how many different proposals can you look at, unless they're just, dissimilar by that much. Each proposal's just, because you got your 6, you got your 8, your 10, your 12, your 16. So they're telling us 5 different numbers of teams involved. Did I mention, Dave? Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that. 5 different numbers of teams involved. So that's 5. And then there's a number of ways they can be selected. Okay. Just go by the playoff committee rankings. If they go by the playoff committee rankings, just take the top 16. I'm not going to like that, but that's pretty much going to cover. They really can't screw it up then. that's the thing. So if they go with their rankings, if they just stay with the same format, just expand it from, let's say, 4 to 16, and they say, we're still going to go by our rankings. In principle, I hate that because they're continuing to tell us our rankings are preeminent. They're perfect. We need to go with our rankings. But, if they expand it to 16, their rankings are going to take in all the teams that need to be selected anyway. So it's going to be like, well, you're still full of yourselves that you think your rankings matter. Of course they do, but that they're fair and right and just and all those things. But you know what? If we're taking in 16 teams, you really can't screw it up. The 4 you've screwed up. Which I've stated from day one that to give them a break, that it's an impossible task. It's impossible. It's an impossible task. We've had one season, 2019, where it was clear who the 4 teams should be. And that wasn't even entirely clear because if you're going to take the 4 best teams, then you would have taken Alabama, not Oklahoma. But if you take the 4 teams that earned it, that was separated because Oregon lost a second game. That's the only year that was clear cut. The rest of them. Okay, I got calls coming in. Here we go. This individual, I don't believe, I don't know who this is calling me, but we'll take the call. Hey, it looks like it's Sean.
Hello, hey, how are you?
I am doing just fine.
I just got on and saw you talking about college football playoff. I don't know if you really talked about this, but I think like the core problem with college football playoff is probably the committee itself and a lot of the people who are on the committee. And I do have a lot of respect for athletic directors and, the people who are on who are big names. But I feel like the college football playoff committee should be full of former coaches and former players who can actually really evaluate the talent and really dedicate their time. Like multiple times throughout the year, I saw like big question marks I had for the committee. For example, they were showing the committee watching the championship games. So like the SEC championship, ACC championship, Big Ten championship. And they're all watching the game with no notepads out, not like taking notes and they're just watching the broadcast view. And then they would talk about certain teams. And like, I think they talked about Cincinnati. And I know, some people never thought that Cincinnati should be in. I'm not really arguing whether or not they should have had a shot or any group of 5 teams in general or other teams. But when they mention those teams, they say, yeah, we've really only watched them play twice this year. I feel like the committee itself, first of all, they should watch more games than that. And then they should also have the coaches film of all the teams and be taking notes and really, really dedicate themselves. And I just don't think that athletic directors and, maybe some writers could be involved, but I think it should be more coaching heavy and former player heavy who really actually understand the game at its core and can really see like which teams match up well, things like that. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but I feel like you have real experts on the committee.
Well, I think that your opinion's valid. No question about that, because you're just trying to get the most knowledge in the room making the decision, the most football knowledge. I take it in a completely different way. I don't know how many times you've ever watched my explanations of this, but yeah, I would take it completely out of anybody's hands. So look at any other playoffs.
Computer-based?
No, not computer-based. It would be, I ran this down a couple months ago. So basically, I would select it. Whether you went to 8 teams or went to 16 teams, I would select it based on conference championships, number 1. Number two, I would base it on record. And then when you have ties in the record category, let's say Penn State's 10-2 and LSU's 10-2, and they tie for a playoff spot. And I ran this formula through all the playoff seasons to see how it would play out, and it seemed to make sense. Then I would go to if there's a head-to-head, and ironically, I was surprised that there would have been a head-to-head decision made a couple times. Penn State and Minnesota finished 10-2 a couple years ago, and so did Georgia and Florida. Anyway, that I would go to a strength of record formula. I think that's how I had it.
Okay, yeah, that also makes sense. So, how many teams would you have in if you were given the keys to the kingdom of college football and you were the commissioner? How many teams would you have?
So, Sean, before I answer that question, I think that the most important question that needs to be answered in going forward in the playoff is whether to formally include the group of five or exclude the group of five. That needs to be dealt with. Right now, we've got a system where we in theory include the group of five, but they're truly not included. They've done everything. There have been teams that can't do any more. When UCF goes undefeated 2 consecutive years, and the highest that they're ranked pre-postseason is 12th in the country, they're not even close to that criteria. When Cincinnati's at number 9 following an undefeated season, it's pretty much been played out enough that we know that we're patronizing them. We're actually insulting them by saying you're included in the consideration, but they're truly not. So I would want them either formally included or excluded. So that would be the first determination I would make. And I think there are valid claims to both. There are valid claims to say whether you go with 8 teams or 16, let's say 8, that you give the group of 5, the best team in the group of 5, one spot. And I can reason that. I think that's legitimate because we've got 130 teams playing college football. We've got 65 roughly in the Power 5, and the other 65, it's almost split even between the group of 5 and the Power 5. And it's not like the worst team in the Power 5 is better than the best team in the group of 5. There's a large overlap there. The best group of 5 team is typically, and I'm not talking about the rankings, legitimately on the field, they're a top 15 to 20 team. And so there's legitimacy there, but I can also understand that they really, over the course of an entire 12-game season, don't even come close to playing the level of football week to week that they do in the Power 5. So we're going to exclude them. I'm good with either one. I just think that determination needs to be formally made. Right now, it's this wishy-washy decision. So that's number one. Number two, if we're playing the game on paper, which we're not, we're playing with human beings, flesh and blood, that go out there and have to hit each other. I would love to see 16 teams. I would just love, and again, Sean, I went through the process of going through all the playoff years and seeing what a 16, I went through my formula of selecting the 5 conference champions, a group of 5 rep, and then wild cards that were selected based on a criteria, not just me picking out of a hat. And then I also went by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee rankings to see what their 16 would have looked like. And those games would have just been phenomenal. The matchups would just have been phenomenal. So if we're not taking into consideration student athletes having to step on the field a number of times, additionally, I would love the 16 teams. I think the 8 is a little bit more sensical.
Yeah, and I think part of what I liked about your comments and what I think is wrong for college football, and I don't think that they're going to stray away from this, but I think that a committee is bad because it's very opinionated and, like you said, wish-washy, and teams don't really know what they have to do to get in anymore.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And also,
I say that all the time.
College football, yeah. And then also, conference championships don't really mean nearly as much as they do anymore, I feel like, because teams can lose their conference championship and still be comfortable in getting into the college football playoff. And to me, I feel like if you're in the college football playoffs, like you should have, like in the NFL, they know exactly what they have to do to win, or just really in every other sport in America. And teams know what they have to do to get to a certain point. I think one of the problems with college football is a sport that I love, but teams don't know what they have to do to reach a certain goal.
Sean, it doesn't sound like you've watched many of my videos or watched many of these live streams, but it sure sounds like you have, because this is what I've been talking about for 7 years. that in any other sport, you know what the criteria is. You go into the season knowing this is what I need to do. This is what our team needs to do to reach the postseason. In college football, one of my favorite questions to ask people when they call in and say the 14 playoff format and the current system's great, there's nothing wrong with it. And I love to ask this question. You give me what a team can do to guarantee that they will make the playoffs. What can they do? And the typical answer, which sounds reasonable, is go undefeated. No, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to make. If all 5 Power 5 champions go undefeated, one of them is going to get left out. So that doesn't even guarantee it. There's nothing that guarantees a team will make the playoffs. That's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I haven't really watched much of your content, but I just came across and thought it'd be fun to call in. But yeah, I definitely agree with your opinions on the college football playoff.
Well, we appreciate you stopping by, Sean.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. All right. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having some of the same opinions I do. All right. We got somebody else calling in concerning the playoffs. Here we go. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
28 AD, Mark.
Oh, 28 AD 28. How's it going?
I'm well. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Reading this playoff article got me a little agitated, but
I noticed. I particularly enjoyed when the prospect of 6 teams came up. I looked at your face and I knew you were going to.
That drives me crazy. If they come out with 6 teams, if they deliberate about this for months and months and months, and then all of a sudden, sometime they're going to come out and say, "We've got the perfect formula. Here's our 6-team playoff." I'm just going to go through the ceiling.
I said we're going to lose Mark. Mark's going to go to a political talk or a music talk. We're just going to lose him altogether if they go to 16. My question is this, Mark. Actually, 2 questions. Number one, with college football being currently constituted as it is it really possible to have a playoff that makes sense? With all the different conferences, nobody has the same number of teams, divisions, all this conference scheduling is so uneven. Is it really, to have an honest exercise for a playoff? Is it really possible to do that with college football being constituted the way it is? You got, like you said, you got 5 Power 5 conferences and only 4 can make it. Maybe 4. Sometimes 2 of them get left out. Group of 5 can't get in at all. Is it possible to really have an honest exercise with this thing the way it's currently constituted?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I inadvertently told Sean that the first thing I would do would be to make a decision on the group of 5 to either formally exclude or include them. But as I've stated a million times before, and I just forgot about my own process, was the first thing that needs to be addressed is scheduling, so that the playoff format, at least the one I propose, can work, because the scheduling gets fixed. I don't think you can do anything about that the SEC is going to be better than the Pac-12. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If they're playing completely different sports, then that's one thing. If one of them's the SEC and the other one's the MAC, well, then we need to do something about that. But I don't have an issue with that because I don't want to be too short-sighted, because there was a time in which the Pac-12 arguably was a better conference than the SEC. I know anybody under the age of 25 is not going to, that's going to blow their mind. But so I don't necessarily have an issue with that, because we can take it to the NFL or any other sport and say the divisions aren't perfect. There are just divisions that are just typically better than other divisions. But if we would, I would address, of course, conference scheduling, because I want that conference champion to be as legitimate as possible. So even the conference scheduling is imbalanced. But to your point, even more so, the out of conference scheduling, you can't have teams and schools running around creating their own schedules, because what results is that there's a schedule. Who in the world's got, Florida State's got some monster schedules coming up, because they always play Florida. They are scheduling, and then Notre Dame rotates through the ACC. So Notre Dame playing 5 teams means that they're playing your average ACC team less than every 3 years. So Florida State's running around, and this is to their credit, scheduling series with Georgia and LSU. They've got a season coming up here where they've got like LSU, Florida, and Notre Dame on their non-conference schedule. I don't know if they've looked at their team recently, but I don't think they want to play that schedule. But that's to their credit. But then you've got Baylor out here who doesn't schedule anyone ever. So how can we assess those two teams? So again, I would bring my formula to and I'm not going to go through it right now, but let everybody out there know I've got a formula for in-conference and out-of-conference scheduling. Yes, that's the word, that would make it fair, at least fair on paper going into the season. You can't predict what's going to happen during the season to make it fair, but you can at least. And then for people that have argued with me and argued that point that, well, you don't know what's going to happen that season, so you can't make it fair. Yes, that's true. But when you make it, it's proven every year that if you make it conceptually fair, then it is going to be so much more fair in reality, when it's played out, than it is now. No, it's not going to be perfect, because you can't predict the future, but Ohio State doesn't become a 1-11 team, out of nowhere. We pretty much know from year to year the power structure. Therefore, we can create on paper a fair schedule.
Sure, much more fair than I've seen your proposal for that, and it makes much more sense and much more fair. And more years than not, it's going to be, I think, consistently more fair than what we have now. Because you're right, it's a joke what we do now with scheduling. And there used to be a time, this is why the BCS, as much criticism as it takes, the original iteration of the BCS to me wasn't that bad. It was very computer heavy, but your schedule meant something. Now your schedule doesn't mean anything. You can schedule 3 old folks' homes and 2 daycares on your schedule if you're the right team. And we'll say they've got a favorable schedule. And look how good they look beating those teams. Nobody's beating Phil's Auto Store the way they just beat Phil's Auto Store. Before, you couldn't do that. I don't care if you had 15 future NFLers on your team. If you didn't play anybody, you got told on at the end of the year in the BCS.
I'm glad that you included. I'm sorry. I'm glad that you included the addendum, if you're the right team. Ohio State doesn't need to play a difficult non-conference schedule. If they win the Big Ten, they're going to go to the playoff. But if they're going to win the Big Ten and have a 12-1 with the championship game or an undefeated season, the committee's going to be fine with that.
Right. I think, and that's part of the deal. I think that there needs to be a judgment. Every schedule needs to go under a judgment, and I don't think they do. If you're the right team and you're ranked high enough and you're big and strong enough and you're prominent enough. They don't care if you play the cast of facts of life every week. They don't care. You know, well, look how nobody beat Tootie by 60 points the way they, you know, it's a joke to some degree. So scheduling definitely needs to be fixed. And Mark, I've always said that I'd like to see it. It'll never happen because of money and because of all the relationships and how much tearing down you'd have to do to make it this way. I want 80 teams to form what you can call a Power 5 conference or the Power Group, the Power 8. 80 teams, 8 10-team conferences. Each conference champion goes to the playoff. There's your 8-team playoff.
Have you divided those teams?
I have not completely divided the teams, no. But I know we have like maybe, 67 or 68 D1 schools,
yes,
along with Notre Dame, BYU. So I'd say find 12 other teams. Maybe make it like a bid thing or who gets accepted and who doesn't. And that way we don't have to worry about the group of 5 and those other teams can go play their own championship. Maybe it's Division 1B or something like that. They can play their own championship and they can have their own playoff and do it the way they want to. But those 80 teams form 8 10-team conferences, and each one of the conference champions forms a playoff field.
You're going to take 4 teams out of the SEC.
No, we're not going to. We're going to take 1 team out of it. Yes, Mark. We're going to take 4 teams out of the SEC. We're going to take 4 teams out of the Big Ten. We're going to take 2 teams out of the Pac-12. Take 4 teams out of the ACC. We're going to assign them, move them around geographically. I mean, even in the Big 12, like West Virginia does not belong in the Big 12. What are they doing there? You know,
I don't
funny
want
because when everybody starts canceling.
I don't want to be the individual that has to tell those schools that they're leaving the SEC.
Heck, some of them should probably want to leave the SEC. I mean, if not for money, what are they there? What are they contributing?
Well,
they're a walking beat there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I came up with 6 12-team conferences.
Okay.
I just added a Big East conference.
Yes, bring back the old Big East because I actually want Pitt and West Virginia and Maryland and Rutgers and all those schools to go back in a pile together again. That's sort of where they belong.
That's pretty much what I did with it.
Yeah, I mean it made sense 25, 30 years ago. I don't want to be the back in my day guy, but it made sense. At least geographically, it sort of made sense. Now, this stuff, I'm not sure, I don't know why West Virginia's in the Big 12. For what purpose? When they canceled all the non-conference games, I'm thinking, because people didn't want to travel. I'm thinking, man, West Virginia's got to go to Texas, they got to go to Kansas. That's not right next door to where they are.
Yeah.
And then other teams from Texas have to go to West Virginia. So why are we canceling non-conference games? People are traveling regardless. So, yeah. But I'd love to see. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that to me, West Virginia is the biggest misfit in all this because the Big 12, other than West Virginia, is, that's a region. That's a regionalized sports conference. Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa. That's where the conference is. And there's only one school in Iowa. And the rest of it's a Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas conference. And then you got West Virginia. West Virginia is like half a country away. They've got no connection to anybody.
Right.
All you would have to do is, I guarantee that I would guarantee that if you looked at offer lists and if you looked at the individuals who are being recruited in the rest of the Big 12, their second and third and fourth and fifth choices are typically probably 75 to 80% of the time other Big 12 teams. Where if you're growing up in West Virginia and you're the best player in the state, if you don't go to West Virginia, you don't have like some ties to the rest of the Big 12. You're not going to play in the Big 12.
Right.
You're going to go to Penn State or Virginia Tech or somewhere.
Right, Maryland.
It's completely disconnected. And the ACC is a bit ridiculous.
Yes,
like Louisville, they're not anywhere close to the Atlantic coast. And Miami and Syracuse and Miami, Boston College and Miami, they're more than a half a country away from each other.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's all because of money and contracts and deals and this, that, and the other. I get it.
Rutgers is a half hour outside of New York City, and Nebraska and Minnesota. That's more than a half a country away too. Like the connection of Rutgers and Nebraska. It's ridiculous.
Right. Sure. Yeah, I think something. I wish we could do something about that. I think college football has bigger problems than the playoff itself. I know the playoff gets a lot of consternation and people don't like it and people complain about it. But I think college football at its core has bigger problems with scheduling and with how we even. I think I would get rid of preseason rankings. I think they're a crock too. Earn your spot throughout the season. Nobody should start off being number one. For what purpose? And then how do you not become number one? And even if you lose a game and you're number one, if you're the right team, well, we still think they're one of the most three talented teams in the country, so they're going to fall from 1 to 4. Or even if you fall back to 8 or 9, the moment you win a big game, you're going to shoot back up to number 3 and be right back at it anyway. You almost have to crowbar these teams out of the playoffs and teams that are actually making it. You have to get a shovel and dig those teams out of the playoffs. They're not coming out of there. They're like parked in there. The same 4 or 5 teams every year. You can predict it right now. And then even at the end of 2021, you might as well say you can predict 2022 from right now, from here, from before 2021 starts. You can know who the best 5 teams in the country are probably going to be in 2022. It's gotten to be a bit of a exclusive club. So college football, I think, needs to relieve itself of some of the stuff that's piled up inside of it. For lack of a better way of saying it.
I hear you. We will see what they come out with.
One more question on.
Sure.
Yeah. One more question about the playoff. And again, for all the angst we give the playoff, has the committee ever gotten it wrong?
So I will take the stance of defending the committee from these standpoints. Number one is that they've got the impossible task of fitting 5 conferences into 4 spots, which of course doesn't happen. So I said from day one, even before there was ever a playoff game, that they had an impossible task. Their criteria has somewhat, at least what's become public of their criteria has changed. That seems kind of amusing that they gave so much weight to the 13th data point the first couple of years, and you got to play a conference championship game. And then at some point when Alabama got chosen and Ohio State as not being conference champions, well, we're selecting the best teams, and they've been all over the place. Have they ever gotten it wrong or ever gotten it right?
Have they ever gotten it wrong? Now, when I say have they ever gotten it wrong, I mean from the standpoint of you go through your season, you play your conference championship game. When you go to bed on Saturday night, going into Selection Sunday, has there ever been extreme drama? Other than maybe the first year, has there been extreme drama? Or has there been a very logical case laid out that says, you know what? Unless they pull something out of their butt, here's your 4 teams. When you go to bed on Saturday night, you pretty much know who your 4 teams are.
Well, I'll say it this way, that I don't believe that they ever got it wrong to the point where I would argue these teams or this team got left out and they are clearly better and have a better resume than this team that was selected. But I do believe, and this is not their fault, this is the fault of the system, that almost every year, excluding 2019, there have been there has been a team or multiple teams that are left out that have just as much of a claim as a team or two that are in.
Okay, I can see some of that. I do wonder though, again, from the standpoint of once you've played your conference championship games, because I know in 2018 there was the question with Ohio State, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
As an OU fan, I remember thinking that day that they had a conference championship game, because if I remember correctly, we were 5th and Ohio State was 6th entering the conference championship games. My thought was, because we were playing Texas, who was ranked like 12th, and Ohio State was playing Northwestern, who was ranked like 21st, 19th or 21, one of the two. I felt like with Oklahoma being ranked 5th, if they win their game, they won't fall behind 5. And what we really need, what my focus was really on, was not looking behind me, but looking forward and saying, I need Alabama to beat Georgia, to crowbar Georgia out of there, and then we can jump in. Because if Georgia beats Alabama, they're both going, and we're going to get frozen at 5.
Yeah.
So that my thought wasn't behind me, but my thought was in front. And so when we won, and then I watched Alabama come back and beat Georgia, I kicked my feet up at that point. And I enjoyed the Big Ten championship game, but I didn't think there was any way we were going to get jumped.
Yeah.
Because we played a number 12 team and we won our game. And where else were we going to go except to move up? I didn't think we could jump.
Oh, and that made total sense. And that's the way it played out. And
right. But I know on Sunday there was...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, separating my fandom versus evaluating this objectively. As a fan, of course, I was upset Ohio State wasn't selected, but I never said that Oklahoma did not deserve to go or had not earned the right. I did make the claim that I believed that Ohio State had better wins, but on the flip side of that argument, that Ohio State did not have a horrible loss. Oklahoma had that they had a couple advantages that they made themselves or were given to them by the scenario. The scenario was that they got to avenge their loss. So it was to their credit that they took advantage of that. But they were also given that opportunity, and Ohio State was not. And the original loss was to a better team, Texas, than Purdue. And also they got to avenge the loss. And that's pretty much what it came down to. You get to avenge your loss against a better team versus Ohio State playing a team that wasn't ranked or rated as highly as Texas, plus it wasn't the team that they lost to. I thought Ohio State had better wins, but again, I had no issue with the final outcome. I understood it.
Okay, sure. Yes, I wonder if the committee, if they get, I think, like I said, at the end of the championship games on Saturday, I think we pretty much have a pretty good idea. Now, what happens after that, once we go into the playoff, once we actually play playoff games, can be, anytime somebody loses a game, and most of these games are probably not competitive games, to be honest with you. The majority of these playoff games end up being not competitive games. And then people cry afterwards and say, well, such and such didn't belong in the first place. Well, you get 13 games to not have that team in there. And if they make it in, they make it in over a 13-game schedule rather than, the one game that they didn't play well. Or they just ran into a superior team that just cleaned their clock,
Sometime around 2016.
I don't look at it.
Sometime around 2016 and definitely in 2017 was the first time that the committee went to this. We just select the 4 best teams, which pretty much then they can use that phrase anytime they want. Well, we just select the 4 best teams. Well, that's kind of a ludicrous statement to make because, who knows who the 4 best teams are? God does. The rest of us, we can say we think we know who the 4 best teams are, or so if you've got no criteria, you can always say, well, we just select the 4 best teams, because you had 2 consecutive years there where they opted to take, well, there were some elements of both here. So in 2016, of course, they took Ohio State as a 1-loss team over a conference champion Penn State that had 2 losses. So that was understandable from that standpoint. And Ohio State had a better non-conference resume with an Oklahoma win. But Penn State obviously won the Big Ten and beat Ohio State head-to-head. And then in 2017, the comparison was between pretty much Alabama and Ohio State. Ohio State won a conference. Alabama did not, but Alabama had the better record with 1 loss versus Ohio State's 2, although Alabama didn't have to go play in an SEC championship game. So that's when they started to lean on this. We select the 4 best teams. Well, in retrospect, my response would be any football person would have told you in 2015 that Ohio State was one of the 4 best teams and not Michigan State, which would have been completely unfair to jump Michigan State with Ohio State and say, you know what, even though you beat them and went on to win the Big Ten championship, Ohio State's just better. But that's what they're claiming then 2 years later, that they can just select the 4 best teams. Well, any NFL GM or college scout could tell you that Ohio State team was better than Michigan State. So why didn't you just select them?
Right. Yeah, the committee's got its issues. I think they do a good job for the most part. Like you said, it's an impossible.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want that task. It's an impossible task. But yeah, that's why I say take it out of their hands. And like you said before too, take it out of their hands and come up with some sort of. I mean, I like the 10 team conference deal and your conference championship, and that also makes the college or a conference championship valuable. It means something now. We won our conference, we're celebrating, we got a trophy, and now we get to go to the playoff. Isn't that great? As opposed, we won our conference, but we're not getting in because there's another undefeated team or our conference, they don't like our conference. So,
well,
and you know what, too, Mark?
Yep. Go ahead.
I think too, like you talked about before with the group of 5 and how they're sort of left off to the side, and I remember your one thesis where you talked about, which I liked a lot, that the committee ought to hop a plane before the season starts and go to the group of 5 camps and say, hey, you know what? I know you're out here in the sun sweating and it's great and all, but you ain't getting in the playoffs. You know, you ought to go tell them that right up front. Let them know. I actually think they could do the same thing for probably 3/4 of the Power 5 too. Because I remember the one year Wisconsin was unbeaten late in the season, and they were still like they didn't want them in the playoff. They were sitting around scratching their heads and trying to figure out any kind of way to not rank Wisconsin in the top 5 under the top 4. They didn't want them in there. And even the one year Iowa and Michigan State came down, they were trying to scratch around, trying to figure out how not to put them in either.
Mm-hmm.
If NC State was 12-0, people would be sitting around talking about, yeah, I know they're 12-0, but isn't Georgia better? Isn't Oklahoma better? Isn't Ohio State better teams, even though those teams have 1 loss? We would still not want those teams. People would still not want a 12-0 NC State or even a 12-0 West Virginia. You know, they won't want those teams in the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
We still give USC credit for having more talent and more NFL talent and put them in. You know, so I think we could basically lop off not only the group of 5, but lop off 3/4 of the Power 5 too. And the playoff has become such a almost exclusive club between this group of teams, this group of elites are going to play for it.
Yeah, I would love to see, to your point, just some team like you just mentioned, NC State, West Virginia, Illinois, somebody just go on some miracle run and earn a playoff spot.
Man, wouldn't it be great if 2 of those teams just absolutely had like their Cinderella year?
And they actually should be able to accomplish that with 1 loss. They play in a Power 5 conference. They should be given the same consideration as all these other teams that we see get in with 1 loss.
Sure. Yeah, I remember what 2008. OU goes 12-1. Our one loss was 45-35 in the Cotton Bowl with Texas.
Yeah.
Texas also went 11-1. Their one loss at the end, the Michael Crabtree catch.
Yep.
Texas Tech also went 11-1. They lost to us late in the season. We blew them out in Norman. And if I remember correctly, wasn't Kansas really good too? Was that 08 or 07?
That was 07.
Okay, Kansas in 07. But they never got to be ranked in the top 5, and they were like 11-1, and nobody ranked them that high.
Yeah,
nobody
Kansas
was
lost.
about putting them in the BTS.
They lost to you, right? Oklahoma. Kansas did.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Or no, we didn't play them. I don't think we played them in 07.
I'll have to look that up because they lost to. They lost late to somebody that knocked them out of the Big 12 championship game, because that was Oklahoma, Missouri, right?
Yeah. Yep. There's OU, Missouri that year. Kansas, and I remember now, Kansas lost it, and it was pretty sure it was a kind of a close game too. And Kansas lost late in the year. Todd Reesing, I think, was their quarterback.
Yes. And then they clocked Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl.
It sure did. They were good. They were a really good football team.
They lost to Mizzou the last game of the season, 36-25.
Okay.
It's nothing horrible.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, 36-28. They lost a one-score game, and I apologize. They didn't. I was thinking of a West Virginia Tech Orange Bowl. They did beat Virginia Tech 24-21 in the Orange Bowl.
In the bowl game.
To finish, they still only finished number 7 in the country, 12-1.
Yeah, and so I think that kind of bias is always throughout too. It's almost like, the group of 5 gets crushed, but then the Power 5, if you're not the right Power 5 school, man, you're not getting there either.
So this is obviously the year that Oklahoma lost to who? Because Oklahoma finished 11-3, 2007. That wasn't the Boise State. That was
we lost to Texas Tech that year down in Lubbock.
But in the bowl
Sam Bradford
game,
got knocked out of the game. In the bowl game, we lost to West Virginia.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of
that was the Owen Schmidt, Pat White,
yep,
Noel Devine. I think those guys are still scoring touchdowns on us that night. 48-28, they beat us.
Okay,
man, that was a frustrating. Lord, that was a frustrating game to watch. Every time I looked up, there was a guy in a white jersey running right down the center of the field. It's like, man, yeah, that was rough. That was really rough. Noel Devine. I wonder whatever became of him. He's a nice little scat bag. Tough little scat bag. Okay, Mark, I won't bend you here anymore. I'll let somebody else jump in here. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you so much for the call. It's always appreciated. You know that.
Thanks, Mark. Same here. We'll chat soon.
All right. We've got Daniel coming up to talk some college football playoffs. Daniel, thank you so much for waiting. What's going on tonight?
Sure. Well, going back, I want to talk about the college football playoff. Now, I think the last caller, he mentioned 80. I think there's 130 in Division I football.
130. Yep.
That are in the So to take 80, I don't know how you're going to pick 80 because I'm looking at the enrollments in some of them, like Tulsa's got the least enrollment. They weren't a bad team. I mean, they might not have they wouldn't have made the college playoffs, but who knows? I mean, maybe one time they might. It all depends on a lot of things. One, I think a team coaching is one of the biggest things right there, and also the players. But I mean, I've seen where Jim Tressel didn't have the greatest teams or greatest players, but he always was able to get guys going as far as to be a good football team and all. You look at the 2002 when they beat Miami Hurricanes and all that. That wasn't a loaded team, unlike currently. Right
Daniel, I tend to think it might be a little bit more loaded than you remember.
They were somewhat loaded, but they weren't loaded like they are now. I mean, Trussell had some good players on there, don't get me wrong. But I also think that a lot of it was his coaching. He was
sure.
He was. I mean, he brought that team. First year he beat Michigan, and Michigan was a much better team at that time. You know,
Michigan was a much better team than Ohio State.
That year, they had better players. You go back and look at it; they had better players.
I think that they might have had a couple skill position players that make the roster look better, but I know that Ohio State, I believe you can look at the entire 11-man starting defense, and they all played in the NFL.
True, but they might. Yes, okay. I still think that was because Trussell was very good at not just at getting players to perform at all. Going back, okay, but how are you going to take 130 teams and divide them up? I just don't. I just not seeing it at all. I don't even know if going to a bigger playoff. I'm really thinking what eight teams or even 16 teams. That's going to be taking a toll on the kids. I mean, unless you reduce a game, at least one game, if not more than one, down, so that they can play more. I do agree with there should be some type of standard. Right now, what Ohio State or the Big Ten plays 9 conference games, where most other conferences are only playing 8, which I thought that was going to be the norm and all, but it wasn't. I think there should be some type of standard, and I do think that Ohio State got kind of shafted on the 2015. I think that was if they would have got there, they might have played. They might have been able to win, but then also we got the feeling that the offensive coordinator, I get his name right off the top, was not the greatest offensive coordinator, and I think that's why they lost to Michigan State or the other team up north.
Well, Daniel, I appreciate your care and concern for the student athletes. And I mentioned that a number of times when I was having conversations with earlier callers about expanding overtime and about the playoff as well. But understand that we've got 130 teams playing 12-game seasons. And so if you do the math, there are roughly 800 games in a college football season. And right now we've got 3 playoff games. And if we expanded the field to 8, we would have 7 playoff games. There are only 4 additional games being played, and those would only be played by those teams. So 98% of the rest of the teams in the country do not have their schedules affected one way or the other by this playoff.
Well, yeah, but I mean, okay. We're just going to take the teams that are going to be in. So what are you going to expand it to 16 or are we going to expand it to 8? What's a good number?
I would guess that it's going to be expanded to 8. I am good with 8 or 16 because once all the conferences are represented, then that's when I become satisfied with the playoff.
Mm-hmm. So let's see, if we went to 16, that should be like what, 4 games, right?
16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the
team that reaches the championships. For the 2 teams that reach the championship, they'll play 4 games.
Right. That's right. Yeah. That would be. I mean, would be going all the way into almost Super Bowl time, or we have the first games right after championship weekend.
Well, they can't do that. No, they need to give them a break.
Or give them 2 weeks break. You know, and most schools right then are into exams.
Yep.
You know. Yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes they just say, well, I kind of like to go back to the whole system, just go back to the all the way back to just the bowl games and like we used to have it, because I don't know, it just seems like not right now, if just even choosing, I don't think the committee always has it right either. There's been a few years that I thought they had it wrong, you know, and not because Ohio State didn't get in, because I am a Buckeye fan, purely. I'm originally from Ohio, live out here in Washington, you know, and I'd love to see them get in there all the time, but there's been a couple times they shouldn't have been there. Not because of it, they didn't have the talent. I think they had the talent. They just didn't have. I think going back, I think a lot of it is coaching. And Urban was great, but I think sometimes he had some iffy coaches that shouldn't have been coaching.
So Daniel,
at Ohio State,
I'm looking at the December calendar for 2021. And so if we're looking at December 2021, even if we go to a 16-team playoff, they will play conference championship games on Saturday the 4th. If you give them 2 full weeks off, meaning actually they have almost 3 weeks off, they have 2 Saturdays off, they would play, unfortunately, the next Saturday would be Christmas Day, the 25th, so it doesn't necessarily from a holiday perspective work out well. But they would play that first round of 16 teams on the 25th. They'd play on New Year's Day, the round of 8, and then the semifinal games would be on the 8th, and the championship game would be on the 15th, and that's only 3 or 4 days later than it is now.
Yeah, but every school, I mean, every college, university doesn't all have their exams at the same time.
Sure.
I mean, some are on semesters, some are on quarters, some start earlier in September, some start a little later. I mean, there's all these ifs and all that that come into play. So where do we have the athlete in mind? And all, and granted, I think most of the players have probably won it, but then we also have to look at that, I think, don't we?
All right, Daniel.
Hello? All right.
Anything else?
All right. No, I think that'd be it right there.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call. Mark. Yeah. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Next up, Victory Sports. That's what we need. Need a winner to call in. Victory Sports. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. What's going on?
It's McD Sports 4.
Oh, I got Victory Sports here. All right, voice recognition doing me in again. McD, what's going on?
Hey, I'm doing good. So I was out all afternoon. So they came out with an article, the College Football Playoff Committee or something.
Yes. It about sent me through the roof.
Where does it say?
Okay. Well, basically that they're going to look at proposals to expand the playoff to either they've got 63 different proposals. 63.
What the?
And I don't know if they're on different colored paper that distinguishes, number 31 from number 32, because we put this on pink paper. Yes, how somebody could buy. But what they don't address in this article is who is making these proposals. They say that the committee is going to be reviewing 63 proposals. Are these their own proposals that they're going to be saying, hey, McD, here's my proposal. Look at it. Let me see your proposal. They're going to be like looking at each other's proposal. Where did these proposals come from? It doesn't say. Okay, the next thing is that they involve 6-team, 8-team, 10-team, 12-team, 14, and 16-team playoff proposals.
Okay.
The thing that generally sent me through the roof was that they are now saying that clearly there is dissatisfaction over the playoff and that they need to change the playoff, where all I've heard from the committee for years has been, this is a great system and there's no need to change it.
Well, it's not a great system, obviously. I was originally on the 16 playoff, and now I'm on the 18 playoff. You've talked me out of that, Mark.
There you go.
So kudos to you. But overall, I would like to see an 18 playoff. Now, an interesting point I brought up in 2 calls ago about the 80 teams. And I kind of thought about how you do those conferences. You have the original SEC, the original Big Ten, and then you have the ACC, and you have the original 8, and you put Maryland and South Carolina in it, and then you have the original Pac-10, and then it gets dicey after that. But overall, I don't think I'm more about rivalries and like transition than geographical. Like, yeah, it would be nice having Georgia and Georgia Tech in the same conference, and they do play each other every year, but Georgia Tech to me feels more like an ACC school and Georgia's an SEC school. So I'm not all for geographical sense when you do conference realignment, which I think is coming. And personally, I do not think you will see a playoff expansion this year, but I think you'll see it in 2024 personally.
So this is what the article also said, McD, is that there will be no change either this season or next season. Most likely the change isn't going to come until 2025. That's when the contract changes. But they did leave room to say that it could happen after next season, after 2022.
I mean, I could see that happening. Personally, I think you're going to see some teams shift around with conference realignment. Like, I see West Virginia getting out of the Big 12 and probably going to the ACC or SEC. And I think the Big 12 is going to add, probably try to get Memphis and probably another team from Texas, and maybe they try to get maybe someone else, try to get to 12 teams. I think you're going to see Cincinnati, UCF, Boise State, all those 3 go ahead and move up to the Power 5 as well.
Well, of course, nothing that you're proposing has anything to do with the playoff necessarily, though.
True, but I'm just saying, I think conference realignment is going to play a key role because to me, they either need to go with 4 power conferences or 6 power conferences. I think 5 is the oddball number, personally. I think you need to go with 4 or 6. So that's why I'm saying I think you're going to see some things shift around.
Okay.
For automatic bids, because we're gonna have 3 wild cards. I'd rather have it either be 4 wild cards or just 2 wild cards. I mean, that just makes more sense to me in my head. I mean, I'm not on the board speaking, but it keeps things even. Like, to me, like 3 wild cards is just kind of oddball number, if that's what they're going to go to. And personally, I would like to see one group of 5 bid as well. I think the group of 5 should still be involved in the mix, at least for one bid.
I am rooting for Cincinnati to beat Notre Dame and Indiana this year and go undefeated. I want to see what they do with them.
I would like to see that. As I told you last week, or remember the last time I called you, I said if Clemson's sitting there at 11-1 or 12-1 rather, the ACC championship, and Cincinnati's undefeated at 13-0, I think Cincinnati deserves a nod over Clemson.
Yeah, we had that conversation, and I could not disagree with that. Once you look at Cincinnati's schedule with Notre Dame, Indiana, Memphis, Tulsa, SMU, and then you look at Clemson's schedule of after Georgia, NC State, Boston College, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. It's like, wow. Well, Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, and
yeah.
Continue. What are you going to say?
Oh, just basically just trying to match up the teams. You know, if Georgia doesn't become, if they're not one of the top 5 teams in the country, then Clemson's schedule is really going to look ragged. You know, if Georgia goes 9-3 or 10-2 and isn't that great compared to what Cincinnati could be facing.
Another note, 2 other quick notes. I think UCF is also going to take a big step forward this year. I think Gus Malzahn is going to have them at 10 or 11 wins, personally.
Okay. I could see that.
So I think that's another win as well in that Cincinnati, maybe 13-0. And then one other quick note, you mentioned it, and I don't disagree with you, but I do want to defend Baylor. That I looked at their schedule, their non-conference schedule in the future. They do have a home and home starting this year with BYU. Then they have a home and home with Utah. Then they have a home and home with Auburn, and then a home and home with Oregon. So they're getting better with the non-conference schedule.
They are, especially that Auburn and Oregon series. Not going to go crazy about them playing BYU.
Well, obviously. I think Utah could be interesting, though.
Sure.
Utah.
Yeah. Yep. Good for them. Good job, Baylor. Way to load up on that non-conference schedule after 25 years.
But and another point I want to make, speaking about scheduling, you do need to fix the scheduling, though, with the non-conference. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it exactly. But
you don't know how to do it. You got to watch my videos, McD. I figured it out.
I mean, I know how to do it. I mean, I don't know what the approach is going to be. To me, I would like to see them have an ACC, SEC challenge with one of other power conferences, and you just play the team that finish the same place this year. Like Alabama and Clemson would face each other in that.
Yeah. I hear you.
That's what I would.
That looks fun on paper, but there are reasons in which I don't think that works, but I won't go into that right now. But it looks fun, and it would be a huge improvement over what's going on right now.
I agree. I'm kind of just thinking out loud. And they also need to do with divisions as well. I think, Clemson should not be facing every team in the ACC Coastal for the past 7 years. I mean, that's just a bit ridiculous. I mean, barely top 25 teams, some not even top 25 teams, and we all know the story of what happens in Charlotte. But they need to get rid of divisions, in my opinion. That'll be the first correct step. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I have faith. I always keep an open mind about things. The glass is always half filled with me, but just want to give my 2 cents on
what
I think they should do with the college football playoff. But that's all I have to you. Thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely. All right. Before we get to this next call, let's clean up some of these super chats. Appreciate that from Falcon ERX, always contributing. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate the you got super sticker here. Then you I posted the comment for quite a long time, but lost track of it. But it was posted for a time about Ohio State stealing the 2002 national championship, which I always find amusing because they have these guys on the field. Next time you watch a football game, recognize the older gentlemen that are running around the field, and they do a remarkable job of staying out of the way. I am sometimes captivated by how these guys that are like 60 years old stay out of the way of these athletes running 4.3s across the field, but they do a nice job. But they wear these, they're not the most fashionable outfits, but they're black and white. And so that there aren't fights between the teams trying to decide where the ball should be placed or if somebody scored or got their feet inbounds. These guys actually, they allow them to make those decisions. So those guys make the decisions. And so in that Ohio State-Miami game, you may want to watch that again. Ohio State didn't call a pass interference on that play. A lot of Miami fans get that incorrect. They actually think Ohio State made the call on that play. Like the Ohio State players were just, I guess they just bullied Miami around to say, yeah, we got to play that play again because that was pass interference. And like it was street ball, like it was a pickup basketball game where you call your own fouls. So a lot of Miami fans maybe don't understand the rules of the sport, don't understand that there are, you can call them referees or officials. Either one is appropriate. And so those are the guys that are running around the field, the older gentlemen. They get to determine whether the rules are being enforced and how they should be enforced. So again, I know you may get that mixed up with your local pickup basketball game, but that's not how collegiate football works. Okay. Also, you may want to watch the other 120 some odd plays in the game. The game wasn't decided on one play. There probably should not have even been an overtime. Had those guys been doing their jobs earlier on Ohio State's last possession on offense during regulation, in which there were pass interference and a ball caught inbounds that was ruled out of bounds that was clearly inbounds, we may not have needed overtime. But again, that's why we keep things objective, and I would love to see someday, because I don't see it out there. And I'm not like a news hound who watches news constantly or anything like that, but I am concerned with what's going on in this country. And I wish we could bring, we want to have a much better show than we do right now. And I need to do much better and all those things. But the one thing we do bring is a level of objectivity. And we do call people when they spew out incorrect and inaccurate, quote unquote, facts. That would be great if that was done in the news media, but we're way beyond that. So Falcon ERX, let's read your latest comment, and then we will get to our next phone call. Falcon ERX, 18 playoff, more former players on the committee. Any proposal by a committee member submitted on colored or scented paper will be forbidden. Okay. That's a detail that I don't really have a stake in, but that's good. Again, when people ask me, how would your committee look and how would you select? I laid it all out during a live stream about 3 months ago. So look it up, because there would be no selections made. Does anybody get selected to the NFL playoffs? No, they're self-selected by how they play and the results of the game. That's how my system would work. We wouldn't need people selecting. No people required. We don't need any people involved. We don't need people making decisions on who makes the playoffs. All right, let's get to our next call. This is coming in from Dennis about, the college football playoff. Dennis, how's it going?
How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. What's going on?
Well, enjoy the show. I am a subscriber and I listen a lot, so I appreciate all your effort. I would like to say that.
You're welcome.
You're very welcome. I mean, you grind it out. You put out a lot of content, and I think people like myself are very appreciative that really enjoy the sport. I think the elephant in the room is, first and foremost, there's too many teams. And because if the committee was honest and, the pundits and the mainstream were honest, none of those teams are ever going to get in the playoffs. So I think if you did that reduction, and they've already restructured the tiers. Remember when we had Division 1, 2, and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
Restructure it all. And you have about 68 teams or so with the independents. I know you mentioned Louisville earlier. I could see them dropping out of Division 1, if you will, football altogether, right? So you bring in Notre Dame into a conference, you can get it down to 64. That would mean Army, Air Force, Navy, so forth, probably gone too. I don't know how people would feel about that, but if you got it down to 64, of course, the math is great from there. Then you got 32, you have that 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. So we'd be talking about real contenders. And even though we know Indiana, Oregon State, so forth, probably never got a chance anyway, even amongst those 64, right? Probably never going to get to the playoffs. So I think that reduces a big part of the problem there. Another thing I could never understand, Mark, was the whole point of conferences in the first place was that you play those teams. So if every team in Division I conference played every school in their conference, that would resolve a lot of the scheduling issues.
Bingo.
Right?
Yep.
And that's really what we're talking about. When I grew up, and I know it's high school sports, but conferences were set up so that's who you all agreed to play. That's who you played. And the conference champ was the guy that won the most. So you could get rid of that whole conference championship scam, unless, of course, you had a situation where, you beat Team A and then the other team loses to them, but they beat a team you lost to, and you're both one loss in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe then we can talk about a one-off, settle that thing. I mean, you play every team, and if a team like this in the SEC doesn't want to play all those teams, get out of the conference. But play your 11 game, your 12 is what they're fixated on, but you play your 12 game schedule in that conference. And if you want to drop a couple teams, I don't think losing Vanderbilt or somebody like that's going to kill you, as a conference and your brand appeal. Some of your thoughts?
Well, you make a whole lot of sense here for a number of reasons, and have stated a lot of things that I've stated maybe somewhat differently, but on the same point. Number one is that
I've watched your videos on that. I've seen your breakdowns, and I like them. I think they're all feasible. I'm just thinking of a way to clear it all up in the first place. It's such a mess,
So, yes, point number one is, yes, teams in a conference should all play each other. And that's why, ironically, the Big 12, even though it gets made fun of and for a time was made fun of because they were the only conference not playing a conference championship game, they actually had the most legitimate conference championship because they all played each other. So you don't have to, like, currently, I'm looking at the ACC and the SEC are the biggest violators because they have the largest conferences that play the fewest number of conference games. So,
absolutely,
to your point, you've got an 8-game schedule and 13 other possible opponents. So you're missing 5 teams in your conference every year. So what's ironic about that is when a Texas A&M, for example, schedules to play Clemson out of conference home and home, like they did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They are playing Clemson more in those 2 years. They're playing them twice. Then they will play teams in the SEC Eastern Division over the course of the next 12 years. So,
absolutely. And it seems very suspect. Also, I think in that problem is the fact that these teams, they'll play whatever 2 teams they decide out of conference and so forth, like you're saying, but they may not even play, a cross-divisional rival for several years too. Because I think part of what's contrived about this is the divisions as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, if you played every team in your conference, there's no more division. And there's no more inequity, and you got to play on this weaker division, so to speak, as opposed to a stronger one.
And another way, Dennis, that I've outlined that is take Texas A&M and South Carolina. There is no special connection between those two schools, but they are thrown together by the SEC to play every year. So if this format doesn't change, Texas A&M and South Carolina in the next 60 years will play 60 times. At the same time, Texas A&M will only play Georgia 10 times in the next 60 years. It's ludicrous. So
absolutely ridiculous. And it destroys the whole idea of a conference.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, Dennis, in some of my recent tries at this, at trying to correct this, the scheduling and everything, you're right. You are right, and other people that have called tonight, in that the conferences should be blown up and restructured for a number of reasons. Some are geographic and tradition based. Others are more logistical and make sense based on trying to figure out the competition on the field and making it equitable, like you're trying to address. Some of the recent videos
that could be as simple as, oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say I have realigned the conferences, so I've taken on that task. But more recently, I've addressed the situation as it stands right now, thinking, we're kind of dealing in fantasy land when we're talking about restructuring all these conferences. That would require so much money and deals, and people wouldn't be happy, and to kick out certain members of conferences. So I've tried to bypass the fantasy land, which it's still a great conversation, and it would be the best way to address it. And I've just tried to deal with what we have and say, how can we make scheduling better, even with these mammoth leagues that are too large? So let's say in the SEC,
if you kept,
I've tried to create 500 composite schedules for everyone, so at least they're on paper fair schedules.
Right. I think part of that is because, with the Big Ten, the ACC, and the SEC, all with 14 teams, you could even keep it like that. Although, you'd still be inclined to think, God, if they just slide Nebraska over to the Big 12, what was the Big 12, the Big 10 in reality, and the old Big 10 is now the Big 14, but you know what I'm saying. But if you slid Nebraska back over and Colorado back or something, but even if you kept the conferences as they stand now, Mark, and you just played out the schedules, and then you required a Pac-12 team to pick up another Division I team and make it geographically feasible, they play at Texas and Oklahoma or even at Kansas, right? But they're still within that 64-team composite or somewhere in that number based on the conference numbers now. We have about 64 plus Notre Dame, BYU, and a couple others. But we did that just by playing that conference schedule out. Because I get you, the money involved and all the politics, there's no way they're really going to realign in any significant way anytime soon. But if they would just play that conference out, and then your worst opponent would be another of the 64, whether it's Oregon State or Louisville, but they're on the schedule. They're legitimately part of the conference as it were, and you just go from there. But I think the question of the number of teams involved in the playoff, because the math works out by having it all the way, and you get to like 8, you would then naturally have your conference champions, plus give you room for a wild card, and whether Notre Dame was still independent or they would join, they were naturally going to be, in the Midwest, you would think. But so that way you would end up with something like an 8-team conference championship-based playoff picture, And I know you've done all this stuff. You've looked at it from every angle and realigned these conferences every which way.
Well, Dennis, it's a fascinating conversation, and you are welcome to call at any time, and we can pick this up. So I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I enjoy the show. And of course, this is a topic of great debate, and so we'll see what ends up happening. I agree with you as far as the selection goes. That's another huge problem, as opposed to playing it out on the field in a way that it basically resolves itself going into the playoffs. But I appreciate your time, brother, and good luck with everything.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right. It's about 8:22. I'd like to get this wrapped up in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So I apologize for those people on the line. Sebastian, how's it going tonight?
Hey, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
That's good. I don't know if you followed the news when the BCS was being created, and then, of course, the college football playoff was being created. But I don't know how we're so mad at the system that's in place, and yet the Big Ten gets no blame when the Big Ten is the number one reason we have the system we have today. And it's the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 wanted a playoff from the get-go. But the Big Ten, because of their attachment to the Rose Bowl, was opposed to they called it the +1 back then, but the 14 playoff, because supposedly the 14 playoff is a slippery slope to an 18 playoff and a 16-team playoff or a 16-team playoff, which is like a bad thing compared, back 10 years ago when that was said. And they're also opposed to having semifinal games being played at either home field, or even one playoff game being played either in Indianapolis or Detroit. They insisted that the Rose Bowl was part of the semifinal bowl rotation. And so, the reason why we have the system we have today is because it's been put in place piecemeal. In order to bring on the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, the BCS, they had to do, hey, we're only going to have one extra game. And that was okay for them. And then when it has a +1, the Big Ten was against it, was against actually the computer models or the computer system and the voting being in place. Delaney insisted on a committee selecting the teams, and that's how they were brought on board. So this is the system we have today. And I'm with you. I wish it was 8 teams. I wish it was 16 teams. But this attachment to the Rose Bowl, and I know the Rose Bowl brings in, there's got to be more than 100 million in media rights right now. But that attachment has created the system we have today. Instead of just going to a 16-team playoff the way they wanted to back in the 90s, or some conferences wanted to back in the 90s. The reason why we have what we have today, and we're trying, and now we might get a 16 playoff, or not even an 8. It's crazy. But the Big Ten is the number one reason to blame, and their love affair with the Rose Bowl, the number 2 reason we have the system, and then number 3 is the Pac-12. And not only that, the conference alignment. The conference alignment is to blame because of the Big Ten. ACC was happy with 9 teams they had, and they were playing a round robin. Then all of a sudden, they had to go out and add teams from the Big East when that conference imploded because of what was happening in the conference realignment structure. Who grabbed Nebraska and Rutgers? What the ACC did was self-defense, but we got to point blame where blame is due, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing that you've stated that's not true. I think it's a little bit more detailed. The last part of your argument concerning expansion, I think it's a little bit more complicated than all of that. We would have to take it. ESPN had a really good breakdown of conference expansion, one of its 30 for 30s that surrounded the Big East from a basketball standpoint, but how football ruled that decision, and then it went into the whole conference expansion across the board. But yeah, you are right. The Big Ten has been guarded when it comes to kind of 2 areas. One would be the Rose Bowl specifically, but more in general, just tradition, more so than the other conferences.
Yeah, and it was protecting that relationship with the Rose Bowl, to their defense. It's a lucrative deal. But I mean, not only Jim Delaney, but Barry Alvarez was on. Quoted, "It would be a competitive advantage." This is his quote. "Quote: It would be a competitive advantage to have semifinal games at home field. The bowls have been good to us." Like that's Barry Alvarez, and Gene Smith has been on record doing it, and tons of other, Big Ten school affiliated guys have just defended the system that was in place and defending not going to an 8-team or a 16-team playoff. And it's because of that tie to bowl games. And that's the reason why maybe ACC has been for playoffs, is because they don't have these strong ties. The SEC just, I don't know why, the Sugar Bowl, they may have been protective of that as well, but they were on board for the playoff, from the get-go. They just had to do it in these incremental steps to bring along Pac-12 and the Big Ten.
Yeah, and ironically, even though the Big Ten has taken that stance by including the Rose Bowl in the semifinals, then it compromises the matchup of the Rose Bowl on those occasions anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Texas versus USC. I liked it when it was the Big Ten versus the Pac-12 as well. But in order to get a playoff, something's got to go.
Yeah.
Something's got to give, right? Yeah.
All right, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate that.
Have a good one.
And we'll take this call coming in from D-Rock Irish. Let's also keep in mind that I would like to eat tonight, and 9 o'clock's kind of a key figure here. I'd like to get out and get to a few places before that. All right, D-Rock, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, a couple of questions, and I'm just going to summarize this because I've been listening in and mentioning that you need to go ahead and move on and do other things tonight and get yourself most likely prepped for some other games for tomorrow as far as the spring games too. So I just want to go ahead and just run over a couple of items. The overtime rule change, I don't know about that one. I mean, in the second quarter, after you score a touchdown, you have to go for 2, and then the third quarter on, it's a 2-point shootout, and I just look at attrition for the with the football teams, making sure that you have enough depth. But just to try to limit for 2-3 yards and using that for your overtime. I like your idea. I think I heard you mention something about going ahead and playing this thing out all the way through. But and you don't even have to comment tonight. I'm going to pause for a second because there's several things I want to go over, and I know because of time and any other callers, I just don't want to go ahead and consume up the rest of your time. So
D-Rock, you are it.
Thoughts as far as overtime.
You are the final call. So take it away.
So anyway, I think with the overtime rule change and going from the second quarter, going straight into overtime, and then going ahead and third quarter on, if you have to go to the third overtime, you have to do 2-point conversions all the way through the game. I don't know. I think it just shortchanges the teams and the composition of the teams. I really think that it should go full blast and run it through. I heard somebody say, not on your program, but somebody else mentioning that it might be best if you start with a 45-yard line and start moving in every overtime, going every 5 yards or 10 yards or whatever. But that's my thoughts on that one. And you can stop me as I'm rattling on. That's something maybe for future discussions too. I don't want to rush you and I don't want to rush myself, but I just wanted to go ahead and run that by you. I find it interesting that in the NHL, and I don't want to go down that route, but the NHL, when you go in overtime, I know there's a shootout period, but there used to be a period in time where you would just go ahead and you would play the whole game out period by period by period. You might go 6, 7 quarters or periods to go ahead and finish it out. And another item I thought that you brought up was objectivity. I think that's why I go ahead and follow you as closely as I do, because it's very objective. It's not slanted one way or the other, and I think you do a nice job on keeping this thing objective. As far as the rules of the game, there's other rules that were mentioned that I haven't mentioned before, nor anybody else, but I think there's some rules upcoming that are very vague for this upcoming year, and it includes uniform compliance. I did notice this year that several teams had cutoff jerseys. I thought at one time they were going to go ahead and eliminate cutoff jerseys, that they said that wasn't going to be allowed, but I don't know if that's the issue. Also, coaches leaving the box area is another issue that they're going to be addressing. Whatever rules specifically that they're going to do, and as far as the NCAA, they're always vague on rules. And they're also talking about the box area will be from the 20-yard line from the visitor side down to the home side, 20 yard line. That's where your box area can be. And also they mentioned something about taunting. So just wanted to kind of throw that out for you for maybe future discussions in case you come across anything like that. So, and as far as playoffs, I think if I heard you correctly, you mentioned 8 rather than 16. And I agree with you, at least for the start, to maybe go at 8. I did see some body language on you when they mentioned about when you were reading things off about Swarbrick from Notre Dame being part of that subcommittee that's supposed to come back with their findings on that. So I noticed a little body language on that when it comes to Notre Dame as an independent. Let's see what else, and then you can kind of summarize after I get done with this. But I also agree with you about knowing the playoff system. It's all over the board. College football players do not know what needs to be done to get into the college football system. NFL teams certainly do know. They know what they have to do, and they don't have to count on outsiders to go ahead and decide on who's going to decide to be in the playoffs or not. I think that's a triple thumbs up on you on that one. It's a moving target in college football, and Cincinnati. If Notre Dame loses to Cincinnati, and of course I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. I know you want Cincinnati to create chaos, and that'll be interesting. I mean, if that should happen. If Cincinnati does beat Notre Dame, and I'm not going to stand here and say tonight that they're going to end up beating Cincinnati, but if Notre Dame goes ahead and loses to Cincinnati, I want to see Cincinnati run the table. I want to see what happens with this NCAA playoff committee and see how they're going to go ahead and do that. And the last point I'm going to make, Notre Dame scheduled a home and home conference with home and home game with Indiana in 2030 and 31. And I know that that's a deeper discussion about scheduling. Why do we have to really schedule things out a decade out? I think it's ridiculous. And I think that's something that needs to be changed. So I just want to encapsulate some bullet points for you, and either you can comment on some or all or none, but I just wanted to kind of run that by you for tonight.
Thank you so much, D-Rock. I appreciate the call. Thank you so much for that, and a lot of great points there. Thank you so much. Oh, boy. This is one of those that would take me like 4 hours to go through it all, but I jotted down overtime and the College Football Playoff Committee's announcement today, and I'm really going to tear up the whole spring game situation tomorrow. We're going to have all sorts of live streams with spring games, and I'm going to watch as much as possible, but I may have to attack overtime and the College Football Playoff Committee's report today. Those might be videos headed your way soon. Yeah, I think I'll have to invest in there. I know that you guys have busy lives, and many of you have been watching me for years, others for months, some for a few days or a few weeks. So a lot of this has been addressed by me, but I don't expect you to keep track of everything that's come out of my mouth. But I've addressed scheduling, both in conference and out of conference, and conference realignment, and my playoff system, and so forth and so on. But I will continue to reiterate some of those points and some of those proposals that I've made, because when people make comments about I would have this kind of committee, we don't need a committee. We don't need a committee. There can be a system set up that will select the actual results of the games, will select the playoff, just like in any other sport. It can be done. So we don't need committees choosing teams to go to the playoff. All right. And again, overtime, it's not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix because you got to take into consideration. It's an easy fix if we're playing on paper. If we're playing with robots, don't have to take into consideration the health of the athletes. Then we can just let them play forever until I would have them play a full fifth quarter. If there was no health consideration to be made, I would have them play a full quarter and play standard football, because I don't like contrived situations. And our guy D-Rock Irish brought up the NHL, and I am just about the last person on the earth that should be commenting on NHL rules. But I will say that there was a time at ESPN in which I was forced to watch a lot of NHL because of my position there. And if I recall correctly, that for the longest time throughout the NHL, a tie was a tie. And that, they had their whole point system in regards to the standings, and a tie was a tie. Then they came out with this, except for the playoffs, of course, because you have to determine a winner. So they would play forever until the game was over. And then they, maybe 10 years ago, determined the shootout. What I don't like about the shootout is I don't think a skills competition should decide a game. You've played a legitimate hockey game, football game, baseball game. It'd be like playing home run derby instead of extra innings, or playing like some kind of kicking contest at the end of regulation in a football game. I don't like contrived situations, and I don't like a skills competition determining a full squad sports game. I don't like that. All right. As for the rest of it, yeah, I could go on forever, but we'll save these topics and keep going with it. Great conversation out of everyone tonight. Thank you so much, both those people that called and also the people in the chat. And thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate your appreciation of what we do here. So all sorts of teams are playing tomorrow. I'm going to watch as much spring game action as possible. And even beyond that, keep track of what's going on online in regards to, feedback and reporting on the spring games. And we are definitely coming on after the Oklahoma game and after the Texas games with analysts that will come on and break down those games with us. All right, folks, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have a great night, and we will see you back here tomorrow. And that's one of the reasons why hopefully you're subscribed, so you hit that bell for the notifications to know when we're going to go live tomorrow after the Oklahoma and Texas spring games. And shoot, I know West Virginia is going to be on the field, and Pitt and Ole Miss and Michigan State and all sorts of games. So I'm going to be on here live a number of times tomorrow. We will see you sometime tomorrow, hopefully. If not, you have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.